Hi, everybody. This is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and you're listening to October's horoscopes. And this horoscope is for the sign of Capricorn. You can listen to this, of course, if you're a Capricorn Sun, rising. Sometimes people even read for their moon signs. Now, I would recommend that you come back to this recording several times throughout the month because as the transits pass, you can keep checking in throughout the month and kind of remind yourself of where you're at within the flow of the monthly astrology. I think that's the best way to do it. But at any rate, let's get started. The month really gets going on October 2nd, which is right away into the month. You see a square from Mercury in Libra in your 10th house of career to Pluto in Capricorn in your first house and home sign. This is a moment of potential change, challenge, transformation, it's very personal. It's affecting you very personally, and it's also involving the workplace. So this could be a moment where you are communicating or articulating something to others in the workplace that's very powerful, that brings you a lot of personal or public attention. Could be a little controversial. You want to be careful because it's one of those times where, there can be a sort of slip of the tongue or an impulsive level of speech or a way of mischaracterizing something that could lead to unintended consequences. So it's a kind of, you have to be sort of tactful and diplomatic in the workplace right now, even though personally you may be feeling, you may be aware of or in touch with something that's a lot more, that's deeper, that's behind the surface with Pluto in your first. The main thing is that this provides an opportunity for communication or learning or speaking or writing or thinking or technology and the workplace and vocalizing or saying something that could be very deep and profound, substantive and transformational. And yet you really want to be careful that you're not you're not putting your foot in your mouth, or you're not, keep the balance. You want to be very careful to keep the balance. The other extreme would be all PC, no substance. So somewhere in between there in the workplace to start the month, you want to find that sweet spot, and it could be a very productive moment for you. Now, the month really gets started on October 6th when the big stuff really starts happening. So October 6th, Venus is turning retrograde in your 11th house, which is a house of friends, groups, organizations, hopes and dreams for the future. Venus is going to be retrograde in your 11th house all month long. It's the ruler of your career house. So you're talking about changes that can be kind of creative in nature. That's Venus for you. Also rules your 5th house of creativity. Professional in nature, but that have a lot to do with who you associate with, your colleagues, people that you take help from or won't take help from, the groups or organizations that you belong to, your social circles or friends, people that you share common visions or dreams or goals with. Your associations can be changing this month. You may need to evaluate who your people are and who they aren't in a very deep way, and how this is affecting your career path, or relationships with colleagues could be very pronounced and intense. Overall, Venus retrograde is going to ask you to revise and work on weeding out whatever is no longer working. Ultimately, Venus wants to bring greater peace, happiness, accord, agreement, but in Scorpio, there's some confronting that it has to do. And it's going to be, again, it's multidimensional. It has a lot to do with your career, your future trajectory, but also sort of evaluating things in groups of people that you belong to and whether or not you're on the same page. Could also be organizational drama or intrigue or changes that are intense around you this month. So you want to watch for all of these things. But that's the biggest transit of the month. That's really toning the whole month, as you'll see. I'll keep repeating it as I go on. On October 8th, there is a new moon in your 10th house. There it is, a signature of newness and a seed being planted for the month ahead, at least, within your career house. So there's a substantive change that's trying to take place right now in your career, or in life calling and purpose, in relation to authorities or your public reputation, your public image. But there with, again, this being a new moon in Libra, Venus ruled sign, it's going to require deeper substantive evaluation and changes in that 11th house that we just talked about. So the new moon is saying, hey, you're ready for something new in career, but it's going to require that Venus retrograde kind of evaluation, especially groups, organizations, friends, long-term dreams and goals, colleagues, things like that. So October 10th is the next big transit, and that one is, wow, so dynamic because look, you've got Mercury opposite Uranus, and Mercury is in the 11th, opposing Uranus in the 5th. This is a very mental, communicative energy. Mercury is God that's related to the mind and speech and learning and thinking and writing and communication in general, and it's opposed Uranus, the planet of rebellion, defiance, challenge, originality, disruption, inventiveness. Uranus likes to challenge the status quo. So you have a potential for a creative and mental or intellectual breakthrough right now. Communicating yourself with others or within groups. You may have something very original or inspiring to say. Will other people like it? Will they not like it? Maybe this is part of what you need to evaluate this month. Can you be your most original, authentic self with your friends or with your colleagues? Or how are your most important ideas being received? And how is that feedback giving you instruction about maybe different kinds of changes that you need to make? On the other hand, this is truly about creative breakthrough. You're ready, you're poised for a moment of great inventiveness, but it may require that you deviate in some ways from the set course. For example, Jupiter next month will be breaking into Sagittarius and going into your 12th house. It'll be very expansive, but the 12th house will take you off the beaten track and sometimes have you wandering a little bit. So there may be a sense that you are about to take a purposeful season of departing from the norm somehow. It has creative fruit to bear, but it's unclear exactly how it's going to do it. Some risk might be involved. On the other hand, you're going to be very careful of being sort of impulsive and reckless with speech and communication around this time, or taking risks that are excessive or potentially reckless as well. So it's kind of a fine line between those two things. At the same time, October 10th, Venus in Scorpio retrograde in your 11th house will be square to Mars in your 2nd house. So that Venus retrograde doing that work in the place of organizations and friends and colleagues and allies and sometimes even benefactors, hopes and dreams for the future, your future plans, tied into your professional life, all that sort of churning. And then Venus squares Mars in your house of finances, money, resources, material values, and possessions. So there's a kind of a conflict now around this time, or a stress or tension that's going to come up around those themes. Could be very lucrative, interesting, creative opportunities. It's not entirely a bad form of tension between Venus and Mars, but some conflicts of values around these things that could come up as well. So as if that's not enough, the very next day on October 11th, you're going to see the Sun in Libra in the 10th house of career square to Pluto in the 1st. So again, some kind of identity crisis in your career. And this could also be about challenges to authority in the workplace. It could be very illuminating. You could be coming into basically a deeper level of truth, the truth that's coming to the surface. Pluto and the Sun often brings illuminates things, brings the truth up, even when it's difficult to look at it, sort of brings it to the surface. It can also be about challenging solar figures like dads or grandfathers or men in power, or people of any gender, whatever, or sex in power. So some healthy challenges to authority around this time. Maybe some questions about how to express your own authority in the world in a balanced way. And again, centering in on the issues of identity and career. Now, going forward from there, the next big transit is October 19th, which is when Mercury will square Mars in the 2nd house. Now, Venus was squaring Mars earlier. Now, Mercury's getting on the square to Mars. And here we see similar things that some of what we've already talked about. It's mental, communicative, intellectual. It's about writing, thinking, learning, talking, and sometimes technology. It's about voicing things, and then within groups, friends, colleagues, etc. And then it's square to Mars in the second house. Values, finances, resources, and there's some potential themes of mental agitation or mental combativeness, verbal combativeness, possibly related to money, resources, business within groups, concern about pay, how much you're earning, some potential for creative collaboration. If you're trying to analyze and get to the root of problems and fix them, this is a great time for that. If on the other hand, you are, getting into unnecessary squabbles or fights, you try to remember this and back off. On the other hand, it's a great time for learning, for deconstructing, for analyzing, for developing skills, for honing an offering that you have professionally or business, shifting something organizationally or strategically around money or finances. Good time for that around October 19th. Last but not least, you're going to see on October 24th, really big full moon conjoined with Uranus, opposite the Sun and Venus in Scorpio. So this is, again, the 5th house, 11th house axis is pronounced. Now, let's say a little bit about that axis. The 5th house has a lot to do with creativity, joy, pleasure, children, pregnancy, romance, sex on some level. It's 7th kind of involved with those things too, but it's a very creative house. It's centered on how do I want to have fun, or who am I as a creative being? Where do I find pleasure and happiness in the world? The 11th is also the place of one's aspirations in life and the community that we share that has similar aspirations. So this is a time of creative conflict, right? It's about defining your creative values, what brings you joy, what brings you happiness and pleasure, and how that is different from the current people you keep company with, or the colleagues you have, or some kind of group that you belong to, or some kind of trajectory that you're on. And there's some kind of maybe a very healthy level of creative dialogue happening, collaboration is possible, but also tension, stress, and feeling like you have to make important choices to depart and go in a different direction creatively, or to set aside creative differences or what have you. So no doubt, once more, like everything this month, Venus as the ruler of your career house all of this will have something to do with your general sense of what you want to be doing professionally. And this could also involve romantic relationships and trying to get on the same page with a partner about what kind of professional trajectory you're trying to create and the standard of living you're trying to create. That could also be a big part of the month. The last, from the full moon all the way to the end of the month, when Venus opposes Uranus around October 30th, all of the things that I've just mentioned will be very pronounced. It's a kind of a grand finale toward the end of the month. Well, that's what I've got for you, Capricorns. I hope that this was interesting. I hope you'll leave some comments on the thread as the month goes on. Tell some of your stories. And we look forward to seeing you again next month for November's horoscopes. Okay, take care.